Welcome to the Radio Promotions and Publicity lesson. Today we're going to go over the indie campaign process, and you will begin a media contact sheet. So the first thing to think about in a publicity campaign is, what does the media want from artists? This is your starting point for content brainstorming. First, the media wants artist news headlines. Do you have one? Can you create one? Do you have an interesting story or event? You can see here, this was news from 2012. Rihanna and Chris Brown could elope. Rihanna would be unapologetic. There's a video. So it's a news headline. People love stories. And if you have something happening, then, it's good to put it out there and get some attention, some media attention. Another thing that the media looks for is the performance schedule. Is the artist coming to town? When and where? And an important point to remember is that every tour date needs a press release 1 month in advance for that local show, wherever it might be. Yes, that's every single date. Another thing the media looks for is personality profiles. People find people interesting. So just think of all the magazines and headlines out there, like People Magazine, you have Rolling Stone. It's all about people and their personal lives. This right here is a news announcement for a symposium on David Bowie. It's at the University of Limerick. The media loves a good trendy headline. This headline is about Adele. It says, Adele, Rolling in the Deep, sold over 11 million units in 2011, the most of any single song in the SoundScan era. If you have a trend to report, put it out for the media to use. And finally, the review. So simple. Reviews are a big part of media publicity. Journalists love to add their opinions to their columns. Now be sure to ask for reviews before the album release. Many journalists and bloggers will not review an album that is already released. So to get the word out, create news with press releases. So you want to get publicity? Create news with press releases. You can use online news wires. We have the Music Industry News Network at mi2n.com, or there's a general pay service for just any press release, and that is prweb.com. Let's talk about each of these radio channels and how you work them. We have commercial terrestrial radio. That's the AM, FM stations you listen to in your car. And then we have public or community radio, which is usually college radio. And finally, we have internet radio and podcasters. So to begin, let's talk about commercial terrestrial radio. The AM/FM stations are owned by large media groups like Clear Channel Communications. You might know iHeartMedia. In the United States, these commercial radio stations do not have to pay artists royalties. Lobbyists for the media conglomerates like Clear Channel fight for their rights to not pay artist royalties. The music that is played on commercial radio is from a program playlist that is based off of the Billboard charts. If you are an indie artist, you can hire a promoter to get airplay, but the airplay will only be on special shows periodically. To get repeat spins on radio, you need to be signed to a major label. They pay a lot of money to regional promoters all over the country every month. It's very, very expensive to get on radio. As an indie artist, just to get a minimum amount of airplay, the cost ranges from $1,500 to $6,000 for a 3 to 12 week promotional campaign, and that's only targeting a very small amount of stations. So I want you to go down below this video. You can pause this one, and I want you to watch the Jeff McCluskey and Associates interview. Jeff McCluskey and Associates is a large radio promoter for the majors, and he's actually talking to some interns that are just coming in to work for him, and he's telling them what radio promoters do in the video. So make sure you check that out. You can pause this now if you want, or you could watch it after the lecture. So obviously, commercial radio is not a campaign target for a typical indie artist. The independent artist needs a college radio campaign. I have 4 simple reasons here why you should have a college radio campaign in place. Number 1, the exposure, obviously. No matter what radio or podcast or whatever you might get on out there, it's going to help you get exposure. 2, boosting concert numbers, right? They're going to announce your tour dates, and you could get interviews, and they play your music and people will want to come to your show. 3, performance royalties. 4, charting in CMJ, the College Music Journal, which you might know by now is the tastemaker/gatekeeper of breaking new artists. Let's talk about that for a minute. CMJ is to college radio what Billboard is to top 40 commercial radio. Even the big labels start with CMJ for new artists. CMJ has been around since the 1970s. It was originally a magazine for the media. It was expensive to subscribe to, and it included new music to be reviewed by journalists. Their slogan is New Music First, and they provide the media today with a free monthly mixtape streaming on their website. They also have the New Music Report, you can see here, it's the charts. They have the annual music marathon and film festival in New York, and a video blog called CMJ TV. I suggest getting familiar with CMJ if you are not already. It's an important part of our industry. They have the music marathon every October. I suggest you go to it. Even if you're just volunteering or you're going as a student, whatever you might be doing, just try to get to CMJ. So let's look at each of these steps for the college radio campaign. We have identify stations and shows, develop targeted list, call in advance, assemble mailings, send them in, follow up, and keep in touch. First, you want to identify radio stations and shows to contact for your campaign. You can use any of these resources here. My favorite is the Indie Bible. It's like the yellow pages in the music industry. They have a directory of all types of business contacts in the music industry, from vinyl distributors to bloggers to music review sites. I have these directories listed below for you. It's in the lesson here. I suggest bookmarking these directories: the Indie Bible, Musicians Atlas, and of course iTunes Radio. You can always do a search on there. Radio Locator and Radio Directory. Now that you have your directory of possible stations to contact, you want to develop a targeted list of stations in a spreadsheet. And you want to base it on your touring locations. You want to include college, community, public radio, commercial specialty programs like any local or unsigned feature hours late at night. A lot of times they're either usually in the middle of the night. You'll see a lot of feature hours and local type shows on some of the regular radio stations. When you create your radio campaign spreadsheet, you can use Excel or numbers and create columns for categories like the station name, the station address, any submission guidelines. That's super important to put down and to know, because each one is going to be a little bit different. Some of them are like, oh, only send us an email, or do not send us an email. We only take regular mail in envelopes. And so it's just, you really need to know their submission guidelines. Contact information like the DJ or the program director. You need to know who to address your package to. So if it's a DJ, you need to know that. The program director, is it a music director? If you subscribe to a directory like the Indie Bible, you will have the information at your fingertips. A couple of points beyond the contact information, you need to have a column for your ad deadline. You see that over there on the right, your ad deadline? That means your deadline for getting the single added to rotation at the station. You need that up and on rotation before your release date at retail locations. That creates demand for your product. It's also important to stay organized with information like the date you mailed the music out and the follow-up date. If you mail it out November 1st, right, you want to have a follow-up date of maybe November 10th on there. And that way you can check this every day and you can go ahead and follow up when you need to. I'd say a good follow-up date is usually like 10 to 14 days after you send the information out. This is an example snapshot of the Indie Bible directory. You can see how simple it is to search for industry contacts. At the top field, you choose the type of business, like is it a radio station, a music reviewer, a distributor, or a label. The second field helps you narrow down by genre. The third field allows you to select a country, and the final step is just click search, and voila, you get a results list. This is an example snapshot of the results list when I searched for hard rock distributors in the United States. I got 37 results. Nice. And you can see here the top one is 101 distribution. You can see they list the genres there. They have website link, email, phone, address, and then notes. And you need to pay attention to the notes. They actually just go on about their history and how they started in 2001 here and everything, and a little bit about what they do. But a lot of times they'll put, the guidelines, submission guidelines and stuff if like it's a radio station there. Now, when you do find some stations to contact, if they allow phone calls or emails, I suggest contacting the DJ for approval on sending your music over. That way you can write solicited material on the envelope or the email, if that's what they prefer. When you send unsolicited music to a radio station, it gets stashed in what's called the bin, usually. For DJs, that's when the DJs get bored and they're just looking for something new. They'll go over to that bin that has a bunch of just envelopes stuffed in it, and they'll just go through it and see if they can find something they want to listen to. So the music might sit there and never get opened if you don't put solicited material on it. So that means you have to contact someone and get approval to send it in, and then you can write solicited material. Finally, you want to assemble your mailings and send them in. Make sure there is no shrink wrap on your music products. Your music, like a CD, if you send that in, it should be like an advance, which means it does not have shrink wrap around it. Promos and advances do not have shrink wrap. And you should include a one sheet. And I would say, start with, even if you want to go big, if you want to go through a real big campaign and you're doing like a national tour or something, go for 100 to 200 mailings. That's a really good start for a true indie campaign. And be clear in your intentions with the DJs. Suggest certain songs to them. Just like you're going into a mom and pop retail store, you're building the relationship. So make sure the release is new. They don't, that means that it needs to be within 3 months of the release date. And, I want to go on a little bit here about suggesting 2 to 3 tracks for their program. You need to let them know in a way, you don't have to be blatant about it, that, you actually know what their station is, that you know what their program is, and you've listened to it. Listen to it at least once, and then say, hey, so I think this song or these 2 songs might fit well, in your program. Try to make it a little personal, and that way they're more likely to listen to it and more likely to play it. And finally, just be sure to write solicited material on the package, write your local tour date on the package, and that way they're more likely to play it and they're more likely to announce it on their show. That gives them something to say about it. So after all that work, make sure you follow up. A couple of weeks after you send the music in, contact them in their preferred method. It's usually phone or email. Ask if they had a chance to listen and if the song will be added. If yes, thank them and ask them what their preferred protocol is for you to check on the reception of the album. Always check back for updates and maintain the relationship. If they say no about the ad, just simply ask them why and thank them. And you may be able to get something else on their show later, so keep that relationship. If you get music played, send them a short thank you note and ask them what you can do for them. They may want an interview with the artist or some free giveaways for the fans. And it's always fun to specifically ask them if you can have the artist record a bumper or a radio plug for their station. A bumper is like what you see here at the bottom. Hey, we're Mumford & Sons and you're listening to WKRP. Stay in touch with the media you contact. If they show interest in the music, put them into your media autoresponder. An autoresponder is your email list. So do not put them into your fans' autoresponder. You want to create a list for media and only send them quarterly highlights of things like tour dates and recent career achievements. Now, if you rather hire help than do all of this work yourself, you can contact one of these companies among others. These are just a good start. We have Planetary Group. They're a radio promotions company that specializes in college and community radio. They're always at CMJ. Advanced Alternative Media, they are aampromo.com. Now I have the links for these below this lesson. But Advanced Alternative Media boasts getting the Yeah Yeah Yeahs and Arcade Fire on radio. So these are some of the top public radio stations in the United States. We have KCRW 89.9 FM, public station at Santa Monica College in Los Angeles. KEXP 90.3 FM, public station at the University of Washington in Seattle. WRAS 88.5 FM, public station at Georgia State University in Atlanta. KLX at 90.7 FM, public station at University of California, Berkeley, and San Francisco. And you can see, I mean, these are all cities where music is booming, right? Yep. Los Angeles, Seattle, Atlanta, San Francisco. So you might want to concentrate on one of these if you're in one of those regions for the artist. Anyone remember this guy? This is Adam Curry. Adam Curry, he started podcasting, kind of. He was like one of the first. He's known as the Podfather. And he was an MTV VJ in the late 1980s and early 90s. If you were around back then watching MTV, you would have seen him. He was always on MTV every single day. He registered the first MTV domain name in 1993. He got sued for it not too long after that. And he ended up leaving MTV in 1994. And he started broadcasting by recording a show and posting it on the internet. Because he had a lot of followers. He had a lot of fans out there from his MTV days. He was a really smart guy, and he tried to get MTV to get their domain name, and they didn't. They were like, no, in 1993. So he actually, registered it. And that internet broadcast that he puts out there, or anybody puts out there, a podcast, can be subscribed to because it's like a radio show. It has episodes. It's typically audio only, but now there are video podcasts out there as well. You can stream podcasts through platforms like iTunes or on your own website. If you've never listened to a podcast, I suggest checking out iTunes and just going to podcast and just taking a look at what all's out there. It's huge now. Adam Curry is known as the Podfather, like I was saying. He has a current show called No Agenda, and you can actually go to noagenda.com, I think it is, and you can see you can listen to his podcast. And it's just like a radio show. Your artist should include podcast in their publicity campaign. You can even do a quick Google search for music podcast and see some of the current top music podcasts today. There's a ton of them. Now, some tips for promoting with radio and podcasters. I always say offer to visit smaller shows in small towns. Artists and stuff don't usually target small towns. So it's a great opportunity to create an online event. You can post pictures and videos and performances and the interviews and stream stuff and do little live things on Periscope or Snapchat. So you can make this like a whole big event in a small town, which would be super excited to have, an artist come and visit. Number 2, always have giveaways for your stations. Whenever I've gone to radio stations, always bring stuff when you're visiting. They love it when you bring stuff, whether it's, music or just giveaway information. You can even give them stickers or posters or swag, anything you want. Connect with DJs on social networks like LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram, whatever they like to use, Snapchat, whatever they're using. Connect with them on those social networks and maintain the relationship. So also, if you're going to go after podcasts for your campaign, you can also ask the podcasters if you can record what's called a podcast show ID. It's the same thing as a radio bumper or a radio plug. You just say something like, "This is John Smith from the Smiths, Atlanta's premier party dance band, and you are listening to Way Cool Music Podcast." So again, it's the same thing as a radio bumper, but it's just called a podcast show ID, and you can ask the podcasters if you can do that for them. And I'm going to post this. I have this posted below for you, but this is just some screenshots of the media contact list that I have an example up for you. It's just kind of a little starting point for you so you can see. You would create first. I have this spreadsheet broken down. You have blogs, radio and podcast, reviewers, news wires, and media contact list. Over here you have the name of the blog, and then I have little columns here with notes and contact information and everything. And let's look at radio and podcast. I have the radio and podcast area there, and I have the station website, and then you have, sent an email, yes or no, contact information, submission guidelines, super important. Or see right here, it says submit to site, right? CD submission only. Some of them have just certain rules. If it was added to rotation, follow-up date, thank you sent. So this keeps you super organized. You need to have a spreadsheet like this if you're going to do any type of campaign like this. So take a look at the example I have for you guys, and let me know if you have any questions.